Well, good morning once again. Thank you for joining me this morning for Your World. It's just about 6 minutes past 8 a.m. and today we want to have a conversation around the protection of human rights defenders and the risks they face in carrying out their crucial work. Well, human rights defenders are individuals who champion human rights and hold those in power accountable for their actions. Unfortunately, they often face significant risks, including harassment, intimidation, imprisonment, even violence. And as we speak, human rights defenders around the world are facing mounting threats, including smear campaigns, digital surveillance, and targeted killings, as we'll hear from our panelists. And we want to explore the challenges that human rights defenders do face in the states and, of course, the steps that can be taken to ensure their safety and protection. We'll also examine the vital role that human rights defenders play in promoting social justice and equality, and why it is so important and prudent that we support and defend them in their work. Now, I'm joined by, on my immediate left, is Kamau Ngugi, who is the Executive Director, Defenders Coalition. A very good morning. Welcome to our studios.
Good morning.
And I'm also joined by Rachel Mwikali, who is the Coordinator, Coalition for Grassroots Human Rights Defenders. A very good morning, Mwikali.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
I want us to begin here, and I'll begin with you, Kamau. Who is a human rights defender? I might have done a little bit of an introduction, but just give us an example, an understanding of who this, when we talk about human rights defender, who is this person?
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting us this morning, and good morning. I think the question you raise is very important, and I must say that the human rights defender, from the word human, it's you and me. It's you and me who feel that the society, there is a way we need to be governed, there is a way we need to live our lives. So are those basic rights being respected? So it's just about recognizing that the person next to you have some basic rights that need to be protected. So I know many teachers who are human rights defenders. I know journalists who want to share information to the public, but when they try to do that work, they face a lot of challenges. It's a community leader who feels that when land has been granted to them, but at the same time someone need to take it away, trying to take it away by force, or children who need to go to school, but someone is keeping them at home. The people who say this is not right, we need to have a better society where we respect those children, they need to go to school. We need to have a school where resources are well managed, or we need to have a country where we entrust people with the responsibility to run that country. They need to do it for the great good of the society. This is where human rights defender, this is how we create a community of human rights defenders. So indeed,
it can be anybody. It can be a journalist. It can be a community leader. It can be, civilian, anyone.
It's anyone.
As long as they're defending the rights of, the other people. Other
people's rights. And the good thing is that those rights have well been defined within our constitution.
Right.
So all the way from, particularly the chapter 4 that talks about what are human rights. If you also look at international law, it says every human beings have certain things they are required to have. So, for example, the right to life. You can't give someone the right to life. It's theirs, and no one should take it away.
Right.
The right not to be tortured, for example, the right to have property, and that property needs to be respected. It is there. But also there are those rights that if you touch on them, taking away from them, then everyone will say no. The difference between a human and, for example, an animal is that there are certain values that we have, certain things that we need to be done to people. So you can't cross that line. So we defend those rights. So they are both within the laws of each country, particularly the constitution, but also there is the international law that we are human beings. Therefore, we need to be treated to certain levels. As human beings, we need to be respected. So the human rights defenders, there are those who are visible, who are known consistently, who are very active. We know some journalists, but other people, some of the journalists who remain in the studio, sometimes they're not known. But you always know the ones who are carrying the camera. But so we have at different categories and level depending on visibility. But they all do one thing. We all protect and defend human rights.
All right. Rachel, from where you sit, why is it so important, vital, that human rights are defended, are promoted, are protected?
Thank you so much. And if you ask me, if you look post-colonial independence, and if you look the history of this country, like the people who fought for Mau Mau, they are also human rights defenders. They are fighting for our rights to own land and also freedom. And why is it important, especially for my generation? One, we have a constitution that was fought for, that needs to be protected and defended. Second is to ensure there's no human rights violation and protection of civic space. Why am I saying civic space? Recently, we have seen in the last 2 months where there's been protests in this country. It doesn't matter what are you protesting for. Sometimes protests can be as a way of organizing to agitate for your rights, but also as a form of solidarity. And this happens, which is also like articulated in the Constitution, Article 37, right to protest. So the moment we are trying to sort of shrink that civic space for agitation, it means when you are violated, you cannot speak out. And before you speak out, most of the time as defenders, we usually try dialogue. We engage the policymakers. Like this has happened, like for example, even the two-third gender bill. We have seen a lot of women human rights defenders and human rights defenders organizing ourselves, including even us women, and even rights for girls. But the moment the government is not protecting, because the person who has the responsibility also to protect human rights of individual and citizen is the government. So when they don't come forward to protect, it becomes an issue of why we need to protest and defend human rights for social justice, and to ensure that everyone is protected. Recently, you can see there's been ongoing also issues around targeting defenders, where we had activists, not only just in Kenya, but in Kenya also we had activists who have been murdered because of defending their rights, like people like Elizabeth Ikaru, who was an environmentalist activist in Isiolo, was murdered because of our work. People like Thulani Maseko, a human rights lawyer, human rights defender from Eswatini or former Swaziland, was murdered because of his role of standing for fighting for democracy of that country. And you find in most time, I usually tell people and communities, we're not here just to make noise. We are here also to ensure that the democracy that we all want for country where human rights are respected is being valued and protected and defended. When this happens, we don't need to defend. And that's why it's the role of everybody. And recently you can see even there's let me give an example of what also like now the women rights movement and defenders we are fighting. Around the ongoing, you see Kaluma coming with a bill, the family protection bill, which if you look, it takes away the rights of individuals, of women, of judging people based on their gender and sexual orientation. And that's why it's important for Kenya to be watchful of this bill not to pass, because it will take us, especially the women, this is a bill that will threaten a lot of women. It criminalizes even single women. And you can imagine if you're a single woman, where we know majority of women in Kenya are single.
I haven't looked at that bill. So
but I'm just saying.
I'll have a look at that bill.
You'll have a look at it, but I'm trying to explain why we do the work we do. Is to ensure like some of these tracks and gains that we have experienced that was fought by people like Wangare Maathai, the late Professor Wangare Maathai, people like Mekatilili Wamenza are not taken away. Because we can't go back. We have to ensure that we progress forward and that we are able to be protected and defended. And that's why also like Kamau comes in and the organization they are working in to ensure as we protect people who protect us.
All right.
Yeah.
And Kamau, you know, Mikali actually preempted my question in terms of trying to understand the biggest risks, you know, and concerns for human rights defenders in Kenya right now. But I want us to give a look at the state of the space of human rights defenders in Kenya right now, looking back from, you know, independence up until now. How has that shifted? How has it changed in terms of, you know, those people who are defending the rights of other Kenyans?
So the whole historical perspective, when you look at how human beings or how Kenyans who agitate for positive change, we have different timelines. So Ikari has mentioned about those people who agitated for our land and freedom in Kenya, the Mau Mau. The truth of the matter is that at that point, the government of the day felt threatened by the agitation because they were happy with the status quo. Take away land from the communities and give it to the white settlers. And the white settlers would never wanted to be disturbed or to be asked, is what you're doing right? So the issue is that at that point, people, the threats against those in power was that they didn't want to lose whatever they were gaining by amassing as much wealth as possible, enslaving the community. Come to the second phase post-independence. The people who took power, who happened to be the new, I'll call it the black community, the African community took the power. But then also they enjoyed the trappings of power. They enjoyed access to huge tracts of land. They enjoyed that they could control the society and that they could deal with anyone who questioned. So then you find during that period, the right to self-expression became contested. If you question how is the land acquisition going on, you become a threat to the status quo. If you said, for example, we need to question in terms of how people in political powers are elected. You remember we are talking about single party versus now later with agitation for multi-party democracy. The people who were agitating were questioned. They were told, you're bad because you are a political activist or you're a human rights activist. And therefore you are bad because you're trying to bring some change that is uncomfortable to the status quo. Come to this period of time, you find that people are talking about electoral justice. Is it true that Kenyans should have the right to choose their leaders in the format in which the constitution has been passed without interference, without, for example, manipulation of the vote? That's what people need. But the challenge comes when, after there's an election, people contest probably the outcome. Do people have the right to contest the outcome? Of course they do. Do people have the right to govern the moment they have been elected? Yes, but they also have to do it within the constitution. So the contest number that we have is people in control of power don't want to be questioned. They want to run the show. They don't want, for example, if you committed to develop this country to have X number of roads, but then you only deliver a little, but the money that was allocated for that huge miles is not there. Then when you question, then there's a problem. So we find that at this point in time, the contest that is there has something to do with, should people raise their grievances, particularly through an expression of protest.
So let me ask you this. Yeah. Even with that, right? So because Mwikali had started to mention and talked about some of the people who have faced intimidation and violence and all these things because of the nature of the work that they're doing, defending human rights. Tell us about the risks that human rights defenders have to face while carrying out their work, and what are some of these big concerns that you have sitting as the executive director of Defenders Coalition?
So it's very sad that a number of issues always expose people to risks. And first in my mind of people who agitate for the right to land, the sanctity of land. So
that's one of the biggest issues here in Kenya.
It's huge. And you'll find that the challenge comes both from the corporations and government itself. So particularly among the communities in areas that are pastoralists, where the community ownership of land, it's not private, where we have different large tenure systems. We have the private ownership where people have a title, but we also have communal ownership. So you find that governments at the communal level, they are managing to try to get away some of the pieces of land, and then they are giving it to private individuals, either for development purposes or they are giving it over to corporations. So you find people who are agitating as community-led activists, those ones are at very serious risk. Just
the other day we saw reports of allegedly a government official brandishing a gun against some unarmed civilians, because then it goes back to the issue of the land issue.
It is, and it's very sad that the people in power want to arbitrarily take over individual peasants' land, I would say poor people's land, or land that has been allocated for the community. So for that reason, you find that there is a lot of serious threats against those individuals who say, look here, this person may be poor, but also they have the right to land. Or this person, this community, they have the right to that particular land. They may not have the title like private owners, but it needs to be collectively owned. The other people that are serious risks are, again, in the same area, environmental justice activists. Because the fight for the protection of our environment has become very much contested. And that's one of the examples, I think, recently, one of the protectors of the land in Kiambu, she was shot dead. As we sit here, no one has ever been held to account. People who shot the lady who was protesting the arbitrary grabbing of the land of the Kiambu forest. You move to other areas, like for example the Ebobut forest, which is in other counties. You find again a whole community is being kicked out of the forest, so that there is people can do the logging of land. If you go to areas like in Nakuru area, in the Mau area, people who live within the Mau area, again, huge fight, because there are people who want to own that leadership. But even outside of the environment and land activists, come to journalists. One of the biggest challenges that we have is that people are supposed to have the right of freedom of expression and the right to information.
Okay.
But the people who are considered as critical or investigative journalists, or people who go out there when people are expressing themselves and protesting, then you find they're faced with very serious risk. So this happens to be among the top most affected human rights defenders. But again, it is actually the duty of the state to protect individuals.
And we'll come back to the issue of policies. Do we have the policies and laws in place to be able to protect human rights defenders? Rachel, when you're talking about the risks and biggest concerns for you as a human rights defender, when you sit down here this morning, what is of concern for you? Is it the issue of intimidation? Is it the issue of assault? Is it the issue of being monitored? What is it? What is the biggest concern for you?
And I think to what Kamau was saying, especially being a woman human rights defender, you're more exposed to risk compared to a male human rights defender.
That gives you a level of vulnerability.
Right. It's the same even you being in journalistic space, being a news anchor, being a woman. There's a lot of more vulnerability that you're exposed because of patriarchal system and structure, the fact you exist as a woman, and especially if you're a black poor woman from poor community, it comes with a lot of vulnerability. But also it comes with a different vulnerability if also you're a feminist activist. Because the issue you're contesting is around power, it's around privilege. And I'll give a good example. I know Kenya now it's hot. For example, if you're an LGBTQ activist or activist talking about sexual reproductive health and rights, where you're not only contesting around the government, but also you're contesting around evangelical, patriarchal fundamentalists, you're more exposed even within your local community and even family, because there's a way we have been socialized. And by the time you're happy dealing with Gava, there's a local community that is like, you're trying to change on how we have been socialized in ways that also benefit certain power of class of people. So you find that's one, patriarchy. Second is about profiling. When you're always speaking out, first as an HRD and as a woman HRD, you're told you should not be loud, you're problematic, you're the people who make things bad, so you're profiled mostly of the time.
So you face perception challenges by the mere fact that, you know, you being a woman, there's that problem of the image. Perception. And
the kind of also the resistance work you do. Right. That's why I'm linking radical activist work and also the activist work that is perceived, quote unquote, to be soft. But there's no activist work that is perceived to be soft. Like you're challenging different power relations that are existing within the society. And that's why it's very clear and specific around sexual reproductive health and rights and also LGBTQ rights, but also governance questions. Because you're dealing here with questions on accountability, let's say on elections. When you start talking about election, people will ask you, the mere fact you're challenging the power that exists, are you in, let's say an example in Kenya, there's Azimio, there's Kenya Kwanza. So if you challenge one side, you'll be told you're a mole of this other side. But the reality is, we're existing in a space that human rights are indivisible. You can't divide, you can't say I'm picking this one, leaving this one. They all depend on each other. So you find most of the time, the fact also we exist in a society that, as much as historically we have history of resisting from before, but the more you speak out, you're being profiled like you're pushing a Western agenda. And you are like, which Western agenda? The fact I'm here in this country and me being black, our freedom does not mean it's only the Western should enjoy human rights and us not enjoy. We should also enjoy equally. But also for the women human rights defender, the way I said also of patriarchy within a private space, when you speak out as a woman, there's why you're told women should not speak out. Why are you speaking out? Which also gives a lot of challenge for women human rights defenders who speak out, because we are never visibilized. And I know you are aware also being in the journalistic space, most of the time you'll only see men activists coming to this space and not women. Because when a woman speaks out, already the society judges you, which shouldn't be the case. And that's why it's important encouraging many young women to take up this space of activism, to take up the space of asking questions of accountability, to inspire more young women. And you could see from the Human Rights Award that also I'm part of, that Defenders Coalition co-chairs with diplomatic missions and Kenyans, is that one of the reasons that a judging panel also were able to give a young girl last year an award for defending human rights is to inspire children also to be human rights defender, to be able to have this generation of young kids who are able to challenge power that work against them. So like it's very intersecting, but at the same time, when you ask also, the other challenge is about the connectivity of seeing that these are not just for activists, but the public judging you. If you go to ask work or apply jobs, people tell you like, we can't employ you because you're an activist, we'll be in trouble. So you find we are mostly discriminated.
They call you a rabble rouser.
Exactly, we are discriminated, we are profiled, we are left alone. And also the biggest issue that I've seen coming up, even within in working with also journalists, is the point of also mental well-being. Like community expects you to be Jesus, expects you to be an ambulance 24/7, expect you to be always there every time you're called out, come, but not expecting you to have a life.
So that's mentally draining.
Mentally draining, right? Because at the same time, the things we encounter at first hand of violation, it's extremely traumatizing.
Right.
It's extremely exhausting. And this is why it's important now, if Kamau will talk about policy, to ensure that there's support from government, not only just to the public, but to ensure there's support of supporting activists for the mental well-being. But at the same time, ensuring that there's recognition. Right. Human rights work is also, human rights defenders also are doing work that needs to be recognized and supported.
Indeed. And you brought in a very interesting point when you're talking about the mental welfare. And not just mental, physical as well as security welfare of human rights defenders. I want us to have a conversation on that when we come back. We have to take a very quick break here on Your World. Talk to us. The hashtag is YourWorldNTV at Zainab Ismail at NTV Kenya. We'd like to hear from you on what you think should be done to be able to help and promote and protect the work of human rights defenders, not just in Kenya, but across the world. Talk to us. We'll be back in a short while. Well, thank you so much for staying with us. You're watching Your World here on NTV as we try to look at the state of human rights defenders in the country. What are some of their concerns, and really what needs to be done to be able to, increase and promote their protection as they carry out their work. I am with Kamau Ngugi, who's Executive Director, Defenders Coalition, as well as Rachel Mwikali, Coordinator of Coalition for Grassroots Human Rights Defenders in the country. And I'll begin with you, Kamau, from where we left off, which was on the issue of some of the things that human rights defenders have to go through. And I think Rachel spoke of, the mental aspect of it. It leaves you drained. There's the concern of physical issue as well. It's not very safe in some parts. And I was reading about also the issue of how the community perceives your work as well. For example, I heard of human rights defenders who faced intense fighting from communities who then continue to promote things like, for example, FGM and early child marriage. So when you're trying to talk to the community and trying to, promote your work there, things don't get easy for you. Yeah. And then on the other hand, again, you're also facing a lot of, criticism and fighting from state officials. That leaves you in a very precarious position, doesn't it?
Well, sometimes we say being a human rights defender is a calling. I mean, you have to say that, I prefer my society to be safer than my comfort. So, and I think that's always the starting point. Do you prefer your comfort, or do you prefer that you have a better society? And you may be comfortable, but when the society is not good, you will never be comfortable. So it's such not a very nice place. But having said that, there are many things that human rights defenders go through. There are many rewarding things. Every time you, for example, advocate for the right of the child, and then you see someone, a child has gotten justice, has gone to school. It's really quite good. When you fight, for example, someone's land that has been taken away, and there's justice, someone gets it. So there is a lot of positive things that we gain out of this work, which are not material, which are basically satisfaction out of the making sure someone else is happy. But at the same time, for you to get that, you have to go through many challenges. And you've already mentioned the first one being how the public is easily swayed by propaganda, misinformation, or even their comfort zone. For example, if you stay in societies where the girl child, for example, is not protected, and the society is comfortable to say that, look here, a girl who is 80-year-old should now be bequeathed to a man who is 50 or 40 years. So some people are comfortable with that. So it takes time to convince the community that it is not right. And by the time you convince the community, you'll have a lot of backlash, a lot of fights. And sometimes people actually frame you up for many things, and which is the next thing that really human rights defenders have to go through. Narratives that people create. And Rachel mentioned some of them, particularly if you're a woman human rights defenders. It stops being a conversation about what you are fighting for, and then it becomes a conversation about you as a woman. Where do you belong in the society? Of course, what the society has decided. Are you intellectually capable of negotiating or complaining about certain things? Or how about your sexuality? You know, it becomes now a different conversation. And I think one of the bigger challenge, and I think it's the one that really affects on the mental health of human rights defenders, are negative narrations that people have created, and also the context within the society and the community. When people are totally convinced that what they're doing is right. And you know,
so changing that
narrative and attitude.
It's a culture, it's a mindset. So then changing it puts you in the crossfire by looking as though you're a bad person.
You become the bad person. Right. And you know, even for example, within the poor neighborhoods, and especially when societies are really affected by the levels of the cost of living, you find that some young people sometimes could engage in crime. But then, within that community, people are so angry, it reaches a point where they are choosing any method to fight off crime. And then you find that there is a contest between, is extrajudicial killing good for a community or not? And you find sometimes the public will say, kill them. If someone has stolen your pen or your phone, kill them. I mean, the truth of the matter is that we have a legal system that says, if you have committed a crime, what happens to you? Right. So when you try to remind people about the law, about what is right, then they think that you are against them. You have an agenda, you have personal things. But that's not right. But having said that, how are human rights defenders targeted? What are the tools that people use to criminalize the human rights defenders' work? I will start with the justice system work. People now have become very smart. They know that if you attack me, or you attack Rachel or other human rights defenders, there are laws that will protect you, for example, the right not to be assaulted. So most people, government agencies, corporations, business actors, they are using non-formal means of intimidation. So people will attack you. The person who is interested will use other people to attack you physically. So an
indirect attack,
which is quite indirect. Right. But I've also seen people resorting to abusing the legal system. So people will come up with trumped up charges against you. So you'll find that you spend all your life within the justice system trying to show that you are not a criminal. For example, you have engaged in a very good initiative, but people will come and criminalize it so that when you're taken to court, you'll be taken there as a criminal, but you're only fighting for justice for other people. Right. So you fight for the longest time, you spend all your years, several years, because court matters in Kenya, it takes long to be resolved. But you're there just to prove that you never committed a crime. But it's someone else who flamed you up because you're human rights defenders.
Would you probably liken that to what is happening, at least in Sudan? We'll get to that in a moment. But in Sudan, there is a human rights defender known as Yasser Mirgani. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's currently in police custody. He's been arrested and detained on corruption charges at this point. And many of the defenders are attributing to the kind of work that he's doing. And so far, he has been arrested, and there's all these charges against him, corruption-related charges. But he says he's innocent, and it's only because of the kind of work that he's doing.
But you see now, and I know about that case because the other hat I wear is that I'm the chair of the Eastern Horn of Africa Human Rights Defenders Network. And the Sudan, South Sudan, and another 12 other countries are part of this network.
Correct.
And I can tell you, criminalization of human rights defenders' work has become the tool that is used. So, because the government, when it's asked, why are you targeting that individual? You say, that matter has nothing to do with the government. It is the justice system that's dealing with that case. But you see, the judge and the prosecutor are dealing with a charge sheet that is about criminalization that does not talk about that person was an active human rights defender who was advocating for the rights of the people. I've seen journalists who have to face similar trumped-up charges just because they are vocal or their standpoint in terms of their editorial standpoint is considered critical to the government. But the charges will be, for example, you have not been paying taxes, or you've been engaged in fraud, or you're a criminal. So those are some of the things that people have to go through. And even in Kenya, even for some institutions in this country, I've seen situations whereby most vocal institutions are now being targeted for tax laws. So you find the Kenya Revenue Authority would target most vocal organizations, human rights organizations in this country, to go and trying to investigate and to intimidate them, claiming that they don't submit returns, which is not true.
Okay.
We have also had a situation where two of the organizations have been accused of facilitating terrorism in Kenya, and then even their resources were frozen. It turns out it was not true. So I think the criminal justice system is something that we really need to reform, to understand that it is being used to intimidate and to harass human rights defenders.
All right, so I'll go back to the question I asked before we went on a break. Is the issue of the laws and policies. Do we have laws that protect human rights defenders in Kenya? If we do have, is it an issue of trying to strengthen those laws, or do we need a complete overhaul of the laws and have new laws in place?
We have very, very good laws that protect human rights defenders, but unfortunately, they are not specific to a human rights defender as a community.
Right.
In fact, there are also no laws that are specific to when we need to protect journalists, for example. But these are critical groups within the society that needs clear protection. So you have laws that protect everyone within a society. And what happens, for example, the laws on assault. I mean, those are some of the laws that we use to say, hey, I was attacked.
Right.
But you see, you're just trying to prove something, but nothing to do with why were you assaulted in the first place. So yes, they are clear. The Constitution is very clear about what people's rights need to be protected. But then, again, limitations, for example, around the right to protest. The law is very clear about the right to form associations. But again, you find that you form an association, but there are limitations. The bodies that are served with the duty, for example, to register organizations, again, are introducing elements that make it discriminate against certain organizations or group. But the most important thing is that we do not have a specific law for the protection of human rights defenders. And as an organization, and I think as a movement, and Lecho can talk about this, we are really campaigning to have a law or a policy that protects the right to defend human rights and the Constitution of Kenya.
All right.
Because that way then you have an assurance that one, there's a legal definition that recognizes who is a human rights defender. It says that if you attack them because of doing what is legitimate,
so there's a framework
then
of
they
accountability.
need to be protected. And of course, it also gives a framework on the kind of sentencing someone who attacks them can face. But right now, we are just used to the general laws that affect, that protect every other citizen, which is okay if it was not being used in a way that is skewed.
All right. And Rachel, then with all this into consideration, then where do human rights defenders access justice when they're targeted for their work?
It's very interesting, but at the same time disappointing. And I'd like to bring to the attention of a case by one of the activists in Mombasa called Phyllis Omindo, the famous case of Oinouru community, which I think if Martha Koome is seeing this, should act appropriately and in accordance with accountability, where she has been doing this work with this community of Oinouru. They finally have gotten a judgment, but also it has been reappealed, making it difficult for her and the community, even in terms of compensation. So you find we do this work continuously, but at the same time, nobody is there to defend us as much as other institutions can come, but the government does not care, which shouldn't be the case. I would be dreaming of a country like Kenya, where we know clearly when we are defending human rights, the government is there also to support us and defend us and protect us, and not to criminalize us. And when you are asking even Kamau the question around even victimization, it even brings me back to the issue on online bullying of activists. And even we have seen whatever has happened to also one of the casts, like Millicent Omanga, which shouldn't be the case. And I call it out, like that shouldn't happen to anyone, not only just a woman human rights defender or human rights defender, where you are being victimized, but no people are held into account. So what I would want is that as much as we are doing this work, government should respect it. Government should avoid where, if for example I'm arrested doing the work I'm doing, not to criminalize me, moving me from one. And Kamau maybe should have spoken about it, where you're arrested in Nairobi and then I'm taken to a court in Kisumu, and I live in Mathare, where we know the other economic times are going on, and then you expect me to continue doing this work. It becomes hard because also it demotivates the activists that you're doing this work. And I feel that we have to be very cognizant, and especially for the young people watching, we can't give up with this country. This one I'm challenging my fellow young people. I know we do a lot and things are really tough, but it's the high time we bring back the spirit of resistance, the spirit of taking back this country to where it needs to be, in a space where also you're talking about youth involvement in employability, you're talking about women's rights being respected, Truth and Gender Bill being respected, they are accountable. I'm also a hustler, and if this government is a hustler government, we also were given manifesto that was pro-hustler, it needs to respect the hustler even if they are going to protest. It should not be seen protest is for Azimio or Kenya Kwanza people. It should be seen this is the right of citizens who are agitating, and they need to be respected. We should be in a space where people like Eric Omondi who are protesting from activism to activism, they should be encouraged and not being criminalized. Because I feel this narrative that Kamau was saying, and even as society, and that's why also we come in as community activists, that community needs to understand that it's our collective effort of community protection that we're able to protect our own women, our own activists, that will take us to liberation. It's not just about Raila or Ruto or Kenya Kwanza or Azimio. It's about the rights of the people. It's about the right of people when you, it's about public participation. We are able to go there and say, you propose this project, you have not delivered, and we are asking for accountability.
Do you think the public understands the kind of work that, you know, human rights defenders like yourself really do? Or do we need civic education? And are there trainings for people to understand the kind of work that you do?
Very good question. One, I think the Kenyan public understand, because people know human rights violation is a human rights violation. Nobody gets oppressed and then keeps quiet. But there's been this culture of silencing people. Like, for example, if Mekale has been silenced today, you'll not talk tomorrow. So it's about also the media giving us more of this airtime to be able to educate the public, give mass production of knowledge that human rights work is not a criminal work. Because there's that perception. You find a woman, let's say in Machakos, Kaliene village, will say, I'm defending the rights of a widow, but they'll say, don't call me an activist, but call me a community champion. So even it needs to be taken back, the narrative that you being an activist and a human rights defender is something that you should be proudly of. You being a feminist activist should be proudly of. Yes, this session are done in community level, but I feel currently where we are politically, we need more of this session. We need more of this session on value clarifications. We need more of this session of understanding why human rights is important and why we need to defend and protect the Constitution, especially now with this current regime, that we can't afford any kind of amendments or we can't afford to have referendum, but ensuring that we protect the Constitution itself, because most of us have seen the fruits of devolution. If it were not for devolution, even maybe my village, I would have not been having access to road. If it were not for devolution, I would have not been access to governor. And that moving forward, the county government has the more power. How do we engage not only just the national government, but also engage the county government to be able also to know that we are watching? It's a matter of accountability tool, not that we are making noise. And this is the thing I challenge Kenyans. Let's be, the same way we are very consistent with our own religious belief and faith belief, can it be the same also with our constitutional beliefs? Okay.
When we're looking at all these things, Kamau, coming into place, my question would be, and I'm trying to get a report here, I don't know if I can find it, in terms of support, access to support and resources, I think that's one of the biggest issues that human rights defenders have been talking about in order for them to be able to carry out, you know, their work effectively. Is this a concern when you're talking about that? You lead a coalition, that's the Defenders Coalition. You also, you know, coordinate a certain, you know, organization still on the same space. But the issue of resources, perhaps even funding, you know, is this a big concern for you?
Well, yeah. There are two forms of funding and challenge that people get in terms of advancing the work and the cause that we do. But funding is at two levels. It's the biggest funds that we need actually are the people support, like what we call the human resource, the human the public support is usually the biggest resource we actually want.
So that's number one.
Yes.
The public support.
The public support. Like the moment we have the public recognizing it's about their rights, that we have to collectively defend our rights, that we have to collectively hold the government to account, that we have to ensure that our laws are protected, then it becomes less of the work of Defenders Coalition or any other organization. It becomes the work that is collective and is shared responsibility. But having said that, of course, there's never resources sufficient to support the work that is needed to empower the community to understand these laws, which are very legalistic in nature, to understand that you need to be proud to protect the rights of your own community, because you need to have a better society. But so I think for the resources that we need is to empower people with the knowledge to take control and to take charge. And the good thing is that I've also, because I run a community-driven initiative for fundraising. It's called Crime for Justice, whereby we hike mountains and hills. For example, we'll soon be going to Mount Kenya, we'll soon later be going to Mount Kilimanjaro. We've also been hiking different hills. What people do is that they put resources through those initiatives to support our move towards having our own home and supporting some of the programs that we do. And sometimes we do crowdfunding. If there is an activist is in danger, when we send out a call to the public, we receive a lot of support. And I think this is what we appreciate most. Of course, we welcome international partners, because universal rights is something that need to be protected by everybody. Torture anywhere, murder, killing of anyone, when community's land is taken away, it's something that's a concern for everybody. Of course, we need that support. But above all, for me, the bigger challenge that we have, that we need great support, is to fight impunity. Because impunity, when we have laws and someone chooses to ignore it, that's where we have a bigger problem. So that, because my efforts, all the efforts of the human rights defenders goes to telling people, this is what the law says, why are you going against the law? So we are encouraging people to fight off the impunity, and this is the challenge to government and all government officials. And
by the way, how critical is government in this?
It's the government that has the responsibility to protect your rights and to fulfill all the rights and the commitment it has done. So it has the duty and also to protect you from other people. So that's the duty. So it must be the role of the government, first of all, to be happy that we have a very thriving civil society in the country. Number two, that it is held to account, because you're in power because the public has entrusted you with the responsibility to ensure there is development and that their rights are respected. So it is the government's primary duty to ensure that the people's rights, whether it's the right to exercise their civil and political rights, or to protect their social and economic rights, that's realized. That's the first thing. Number two, it's the duty of the state to ensure that I'm safe. Whether I am an activist, whether I am a teacher, or whether I'm a journalist, it is the duty of the state. And I think what we need to tell the public and we need to do is to tell we need to hold the government to account. If the law states that we need to protect our people and you fail to protect the people, then you have no legitimacy to be in power, because the power we have donated to you is that you take care of us. So when you violate our rights, then you have no justification to be in a position that you are in. I think the other concern that I feel that we have to really commit ourselves to, it's even ourselves taking the position that I am first and foremost a citizen and have a duty and responsibility. Because I've seen situations whereby it's the public that violates other people. And I think that is where we have to stop. You can't say that I want justice, but yourself, you are engaged in violating the rights of the girl in your own society. That you feel that women have no justification to live, or they are less human than the men within the same society. I think it has to start with the revision of ourselves in terms of our values. You can't say certain people within the society need to be attacked or they should not belong. No, we are all one human family, and I think we need to be protective of each other and to protect our rights. So for me, first and foremost, even as we think about the resources that we need, it's if you can keep away, because I think I want to be out of business very soon. But that will happen when you start respecting my right and I start respecting your right. So we need to respect each other. At the community level, it's our responsibility. But then we have the state that have the utmost duty to ensure that all of us are safe, that all of us, our rights are respected, and the laws and the constitution is respected and protected.
All right. And Rachel, you probably have the last word here, because we only have maybe like a minute or two. From where you sit and all these concerns that you have and all the challenges that you're facing as a human rights defender, key takeaway for you, what needs to be done?
So one of the things is that people-to-people solidarity is important, that we're able to stand there and protect each other. And echoing what Kamau was saying, we should not be in a country where we are seeing politicians inciting violence, inciting genocide, targeting LGBTQ people and people are not holding them into account, targeting women because of GBV and nobody's holding them into account. We should not be in a country where activists are being killed and nobody's holding government into account. People are being killed, nobody's holding government into account. Government should be held into account. If they have failed, they should say, we resign, elect a new government. That's one. Secondly, global solidarity is important. We have seen government-to-government solidarity. Why not people-to-people solidarity from different countries and different initiatives? And then in terms of resourcing, the same way you resource religious institution, resource your own local activist or community-based organization where we're able to say we believe in this cause. It works on our advantage. So if I'm getting my salary, here is 10% of my salary, or here is my sadaka, support the local initiative. And stop seeing us as criminals, Kenyans. We're also human like you. We love this country. If we did not love this country, we would have gone. Which camera is going to State House? This one. This one is for Ruto, okay. So Ruto, Honorable President Ruto, activists, we are here also for the love of this country. Policy makers, start seeing us as human beings and invest on us. Respect, defend, and protect human rights defenders. Respect, protect women human rights defenders. It's for the benefit of this country.
All right.
And then as the public, we should all be activists.
Okay.
Yes.
I think that perhaps was anchored on, because I was looking at the Kenya Human Rights, Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, and there's a model human rights defenders policy and action plan.
Correct.
I think it's already in place.
It's the model policy and action plan. We have a model policy for the protection of human rights defenders.
Right.
It's something that has been developed, but it has to be taken to the legal processes. It's been submitted to the Attorney General's office.
So it's yet to be adopted?
It has not been adopted. So we hope that there will be a specific law for the protection of human rights defenders.
Okay.
But at the same time, as we said, let the public know that human rights defenders are their voices, and they should support them so that we can have a better society. And not just in Kenya, but globally. So we stand in solidarity with the brothers and sisters in Sudan.
And we're continuing to take a look as well at that development in Sudan as well, with regards to everything that is happening there. But thank you, Kamau Ngugi, Executive Director, Defenders Coalition, Rachel Mwikali, Coordinator, Coalition for Grassroots Human Rights Defenders, just having a conversation around the welfare of human rights defenders here in the country, in that space that they do have, and of course the risks and challenges and concerns that I've raised this morning. Well, that's it from me on Your World, sitting in for Winnie Lubembe. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Zainab Ismail. Let's continue this conversation online. The hashtag is Your World NTV, at Zainab Ismail at NTV Kenya. Have yourself a lovely morning and good day ahead.